Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the IWFM webinar series. Yes, we had the summer. I hope you enjoyed the summer. We're back on our Navigating Turbulent Times series. And today you see on your screens there, you've joined us today about the Digital Twin Journey series. So this is actually part one of a three-part series. And we've entitled this Establishing the Single Source of Truth. So welcome members and non-members to this episode, and also some of the returning viewers, listeners that have joined us on previous NTT episodes. So we've got an exciting episode in store today. So if you just move to the next screen. For many of you, as mentioned there, I'm Peter Brogan, Head of Research and Insight at IWFM. And really today's episode is going to be taking through the practicalities of the digital twin and what this really means to a facilities manager. So what makes a digital twin, what powers a digital twin, and who uses a digital twin. So as I say, this is the first part in the series. So you've got lovely pictures of our panel today, or our presenters, I should say, in terms of who you'll be hearing from today around digital twins in this first episode. And I'd like just to introduce Tom, who you can see on your screens there, Tom Brooks from Microsoft. So Tom, can you do a quick introduction to our audience, just a little bit of background about your dear self? That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. So, my name is Tom Brooks. I'm one of the client directors within the Enterprise Business Division of Microsoft. I look after the facilities management sector. So some of the largest FM companies in the UK and globally are some of my customers who I work with, helping develop new product solutions and services.
No, thank you, Tom. So we'll be hearing from Tom on today's episode, giving the Microsoft perspective on digital twins. And as you can see there, gentlemen I've known for many years, one of our esteemed volunteers and our chair of our technology special interest group, Gordon Mitchell. So good afternoon, Gordon.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Peter. As Peter says, I'm the chair of the Technology Special Interest Group with the Institute. Really looking forward to hearing from Tom today and all the exciting digital twin work going on at Microsoft, and hopefully bring a little bit of value to our members as well on this digital journey.
No, thank you, Gordon. So you'll be hearing from Gordon up first. So if we just move to the next slide, this is just really to demonstrate our work with Microsoft. Obviously, we've got the pleasure of having Tom on today's episode, but some future output that's really triggered our future work with Microsoft and this webinar series. So on your screens there, you can see the QR codes, some of the work we've been supported by the two individuals on this webinar, as well as Microsoft, around the Smart Places Ecosystem Forum, where digital twins was discussed. That's available on our website, as well as a Bridging Facilities Management Digital Divide, the Power of Partnerships guide that was produced with Microsoft. So that material is available on the Insight pages, and I'll be reminding you of that later on in the presentation. At this point, before I jump into our first presenter, Gordon, just like to remind the audience that we are having a Q&A section. So please send your questions throughout the webinar. I'm sure that we try and get to many questions to Tom and Gordon, but we've got a dedicated section at the end of today's episode. So that's probably enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Gordon because there's a lot of great material to go through today, but I will return later to take you through the Q&A section of today's webinar. So Gordon, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so really what today I was looking at starting is the conversation of particularly what is a digital twin for FM and our specific audience. It's a bit of a buzzword for sure at the moment, but it does hold so much promise. But we need to, I guess, try and get it dancing a little to the FM tune rather than us dancing to it, I guess. So what, I guess the question of today is the single source of truth, and what is ultimately a digital twin. So a digital twin and BIM are two different things, although they do have a relationship. The information model that sits inside BIM that we're all getting more familiar with, when it comes to life and starts to both work with your real-time data but also forecasted information, we start to get some way towards understanding what a digital twin can be. I think it's where BIM is sitting more as this information environment. A digital twin starts to very much work side by side with us in our operational function and capacity. Clearly, its core idea is that it's a like for like digital representation, which could be either of an asset, could be of a place or a space, but it could be something like a process as well. So to try and kind of lift it up to maybe some of the highest level, I have on the screen now a framework from International Standards Committee, Committee 268, which is on sustainable cities. And you can see here a hierarchical structure of how cities can considered from environment all the way down to policy and government. And this in some ways could be representative of that the digital twin needs at this city level. But of course, for a digital twin, you could go right down to the citizen point of view and look at something or an institute like the NHS, and they are currently building digital twins of people for obvious reasons and medical and health and well-being purposes that are almost as complex and sometimes maybe even more complex than the digital twins of cities. So I think in some ways the concept of this digital representation of something in our physical world is there, but almost to convey the full concept, it's a whole ecosystem, digital twins of digital twins. When you start to get to where does the edge of a digital twin lie? So the human-based model of a digital twin, does it stop when you come to think about the city considerations? I would argue not. So what does the future of this digital promise mean, and how does that, I guess, start to be considered by our own profession? Some of you may be aware of the right-hand side graphic here, which came out of the Centre for Digital Built Britain work called the Gemini Principles and Papers. And this is really starting to show how you basically bring a digital twin to life. If you're not dealing with ongoing data, then the digital twin really becomes a digital mirror, and in that it becomes a reference document rather than a living aid to the operational practice and functionality. So the idea here with this graphic is to power a digital twin, we're very much looking at a techno-socio ecosystem where these three quadrants of our place, our digital environment, and obviously the people that interact, it's that people, place, technology dynamic that we've all heard many times. But in interweaving this into, in my opinion, the foundation of operation and best practice, we are one of the sectors that I think give a digital twin a real chance at delivering a return of investment and making these big impactful changes. This to me then flows through into some sort of environment where we have to consider aligning to our operational need the aspects that constitute something so comprehensive and potentially vast as a digital twin. Not every operation, and in fact very few operations, would be in a place to go 100% digital in one big bang. So breaking the landscape down into the core kind of stakeholder areas really allows the facility manager to take a leading march on the digital transformation that many organizations at an organization level are carrying out just now, but are world round really struggling with the adoption and the integration of it. I think this is a great opportunity for ourselves and our profession to really support that HR viewpoint through to the IT, through to outcomes, KPIs, and everything there within. But I do think it's a slight case of how do you eat the elephant. So these are 6 kind of core pillars, as I would see it, to help a facility strategies start to become digital. This then has to also be considered alongside maturity levels. It's very difficult to take an emerging environment within your organization through all the way to a level 5 fully digitized service. So normally, again, it's one step at a time a little here. So I think not only do you have to consider this connected landscape of stakeholders, but you also need to go on a bit of a roadmap of bringing that maturity at the right place in the right time in the right way for your operation to thrive. And if you take these two concepts together, you kind of get something like a graphic that I'm showing just now, which is a foundational kind of pillar, a strategy for the FM to start to look at its whole operational function and start to really take not only your people, your users, but also your ecosystem on a journey towards, fully realized digital twin potential. What I wanted to just really highlight here as well is some of the considerations of applying digital. And again, looking at the work that came out of CDBB efforts and these Gemini principles, anytime you implement a change, there's a responsibility on the instigator of said change. And data is also at the same time not perfect in and of itself. So there's considerations around really the trust and the ethics of the data you're working with. How full are the sets there? How holistic are they in terms of whole life information? So I think for FM, again, because of our very broad service suite and the amount of touch points we have with an organization, and we are in essence the main support function, it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to bring a bit of guidance and leadership on the right way to change, the right way to digitize, and a more sustainable methodology that lets us take everyone on that journey, be inclusive, but also you have to have some degree of vision for where you're looking to take everybody. So I think this bringing and blending in some of these principal considerations again lets us start to really play into the C-suite and be a main part on supporting this transformational journey. We're not going to stop for questions just now, but what I'd like to do now is hand over to Tom. I think what I was really looking to do is move into showing the landscape, how an FM operation can consider becoming digital and taking its constituent kind of parts of the organization on that principal journey. But I think we're going to hopefully see some real tangible aspects from Tom now and some of the phenomenal work going on within Microsoft in this domain. Tom, can I hand over to you, please?
Sure. Thanks, Gordon. I hope you can all hear me okay. So there's a number of things that I'd like to take you through today. So first of all, it's the kind of why behind digital twins, the time of why are organizations looking at them, what does it mean to us within the FM sector. Then also I want to take you through what we've done at Microsoft at our headquarters over in Seattle about how actually we're using this in a real life practical scenario. So it's not just, if you like, a theory, which is a nice idea, it's actually how we're driving the value and the benefits across real estate, security, as well as our FM practice. So firstly, just make sure I can move the slides on. There we go. Firstly, why are we looking at digital twins? And really, this is part of taking organizations now, through taking advantage of the digital transformation that's occurring in absolutely every industry that we have. I mean, this was very accelerated over COVID, as we all know. However, with the challenging environment that we have at the moment, this again is being re-looked at in terms of how can we gain efficiencies within our businesses, whether through the products we service, through engaging our customers, knowing our customers better, or optimizing the operations that we perform. Now, moreover than that, people are becoming more and more important to these operations, and the FM being a very people-centric part of any organisation or any outsourced service of an organisation really means that actually we are becoming very central to how we look at digital feedback loops. And as we know, so I'm talking with the slides on, there we go. As we know, there are often major gaps that prevent digital feedback loops happening. And large portions of the organisation are digitised. Specifically, if we think about the FM sector, I mean, with the customers that I work with, the number of frontline staff who aren't digitised, who don't use digital technology at all, who aren't connected to the organisation is probably the majority, I would say. And what this means is there's data siloed across organisations, so we're not running businesses as efficiently as we possibly could be. Now, what's the conversation in the boardroom at the present moment in time? So we know this from talking to our current customers within the sector, that there's things which are very obvious at the moment. So rise in material and labour costs, we all know the cost of living is going up. But on top of that, there's regulation, which is always being driven forward, especially to do with sustainability and health and safety. This is creating more frequent more challenges at board level about how do you actually build these into your FM contracts and maintain, especially if you're working with governments, and maintain the same level of service and the same level of profitability as you did previously. There are different frameworks, supply chains are disrupted at the moment. Microsoft, we found that very much with our supply of hardware, and the fact that we didn't have hardware being delivered to us in the US or the UK for about 6 months because of supply chain constraints over in China. Then on the softer side of things, skills is definitely an issue, and this comes all the way from people at board level, middle management, all the way through to front office people and people in the front line as well. People expecting a lot more from their service providers. However, we don't necessarily think the skills are actually there to match this. And also the accelerated digitization and different revenue streams. People are looking at how they can generate more revenue for their organization through some facilities management. And so what this means is actually, you know, there's real challenges in the industry at the moment. There's lots of data integration issues. We have multiple platforms across the sectors, across different areas. And it means you have weak collaboration between different parts of the businesses. And people are, the market at the moment is very hot for people moving around. So how do you maintain that knowledge and skills and experience across your organization? So there's a number of different areas which are driving facilities management forward, which is why we think digital twins actually help solve some of these issues. So how do I think of digital twins at Microsoft? We have essentially what we call the IoT and intelligent infrastructure. So it's actually more than just a building or an operation. There's actually a huge number of different things which come and form a wider IoT environment. So everything from transportation, traffic and parking through to housing, energy, building. Sorry, I'll just go back a slide. It's moved on to its own accord. There we go, go back a slide, apologies. There we go. So there's everything that we have which encompasses the current environment. And when Gordon was talking about some of the ISO standards we're working with across society, really the IoT and intelligent infrastructure forms a key part of it. And Microsoft, we work very close with lots of cities to create a sustainable infrastructure moving forward. And all this IoT and intelligence forms part of it. And what this does is produce a huge amount of data. But really the challenges we have is being able to act on this data, act on and then have achievable insights and being able to do actionable insights from this data as well. Now, digital twins have evolved over time. It's not something new. It's been around for a while, actually. So we had back in 1985 is when it first started, and when we had what we call information mirroring models. And this was essentially just R&D and engineering focus. So just modeling and analysis of a specific object and what it could look like in a virtual environment. And then moving forward, this became more like simulation and 3D printing. So how do we actually begin to do virtual assembly across our manufacturing lines and our processes and actually start building out that process? And this is, again, where we've mainstreamed 3D printing. Moving forward, we then started having connected IoT services, and this is actually relatively recently, so only 5 years ago or so, where we started to find out that actually within whether it's home appliances or whether within large buildings, there was a lot of connected IoT services out there, and actually this started getting feedback and started generating these digital feedback loops, but didn't really start developing what we call true digital twins until we now have the ability for humans and devices to collaborate together. We have the ability to build mixed reality experiences, so that's the real and virtual world together, and actually start putting spatial awareness, intelligence into digital twins. And this is where we start really driving the value out from these particular models. Now, what does this mean? So this means there's an awful lot of capability and outcomes that can be driven from the digital twins. So everything from equipment management, so things which are very familiar to us, of preventative maintenance, monitoring, control, building automation, that's kind of some of the more basic equipment things. But what we're seeing now a lot more is how we utilize space better, how we do vehicle parking better, how we actually do things. This is things within our physical workplaces. How do we generate and build better workplaces and work environments to people? So it's really changing the way people work in their buildings. And something that we do at Microsoft as well is we've had a work study, which has just been launched actually 2 days ago, I believe, by our CEO, which is our second iteration of it after COVID, which talks about how people are changing their working habits due to COVID. And we're seeing a lot more people return to offices than what we saw previously about a year ago when we first did it. So how are we changing our workspaces? And the ability to drive digital twins and build the digital twin modeling gives us a good ability to be able to give us the good ability to be able to share this data and look at things across different areas. Just to bring a little bit of reality to it, what this means is I just want to talk through some of the digital transformation we did of our Redmond campus. And this is not just a theoretical case study, this is a real life case study of things that we've driven across our business in the US. Sorry, the mouse has gone crazy, sorry. So firstly, let me talk around the scale of what the project was all around. So we're very fortunate in the fact that we have a very large campus over in the US, and we actually own the building space and the buildings and all the operations that we can put in those buildings. And what we want to do is build sort of a set of 5 unique villages there related to some of our business operations, business units, but all completely interconnected through subterranean parking, through bus services which run around it. But when you think about the number of people who work there, so about 12,000 people who pretty much daily commute there and thereabout to that, it's actually a huge flow of people to and from that particular area. A lot of acres, so 72 acres, and we built 17 new buildings as part of this campus infrastructure. And one of my colleagues had just been over there and just said there's actually quite incredible the amount of work that was gone into rebuilding these buildings. And there's a number of reasons why these buildings were rebuilt. The fact that some of the original buildings were getting on for 30, 40 years old. So retrofitting them was become very, very cost prohibitive. So we started building the buildings from scratch using modern construction techniques, making sure they're all interconnected and actually building a much more sustainable campus moving forward. So this is what it looked like. This is what it kind of looks like now. And the key point to get across here is actually there was a lot of contractors we had to use, a lot of architectural firms that we had to use as well. So this was very much a collaboration between multiple different parties. So it's not just a one size fits all and working with one party. We have to make sure we work with a different number of different people across the various different sectors. And for a project management team, we had CBRE heavily involved, and CBRE are one of our key FM providers that we use out in the US. So they're very key to our overall view of the project. And as you can see, this is the kind of wider view, and we've added lots of sporting facilities in the middle as well. So to really make it an inclusive campus which people want to come and work at, as well as provide the right facilities and parking that gives us the ability to really attract the right people to work for us, because we suffer like the rest of the world at the moment in terms of being able to get the right people to actually come and work for us every day. So what was our vision behind it? So the vision was connected, accessible, sustainable, and secure. So these are 4 key things that we believe that should be part of any future campus or future working environment. The connected aspect, both in terms of technology, but also making sure people are connected to that workspace. And accessibility is making sure people, it doesn't matter where you're, if you're disabled or whether you have issues in terms of your size or anything like that, you should be able to use the workspace exactly the same as everybody else. We have to make sure these new buildings or this new campus is meeting our sustainable goals we set out to market, which has been carbon negative at the time of 2030. So really, there's a lot of different areas which really hit on it. And from a security perspective, for us as a company which deals 100% in IP, security is absolutely paramount important to be able to make sure these workspaces create the best experience for our employees. And to do this, it's a number of different things that actually really underpin this. And it's all about making sure we grow as an organization, but also, as I mentioned previously, maintain the talent and then optimize our cost and efficiency. So it's more than just one business outcome we're looking for, it's multiple different tangents of business outcomes. Now, I'm just going to play a video, which I hope you can hear, which shows some of the true benefits that we're seeing and how it's actually working in reality. Let me just play this.
Imagine a world where buildings learn and adapt to user needs, serving as a technology platform providing insights which enable better operational outcomes. Well, you can stop imagining. The buildings in my portfolio are designed to do just that. The buildings are always capturing, measuring, and processing data to better understand how products and services are used. Things like lighting, the HVAC, spaces, and even the elevators create intelligent infrastructure to drive decision-making. 2 years in, I'm able to look at evolving usage patterns to help inform what I may need after 3 years. Based on data trends, I can see that we can reduce the footprint for this building. The technology helps me plan for what we actually need. Planning for the future has never been easier. Remember when managers had to do this all on their own? And it doesn't just end there. In the past, we could only be reactive after a ticket was filed. Now, thanks to predictive analytics, our system notifies the facility manager of a potential issue, giving the manager and the engineer a head start in finding a resolution. I can proactively monitor the health of my portfolio in one clear picture. Let's be honest here, I have a business to run. Breakdown avoided. If there's an issue with the equipment in a reserved conference room or HVAC breaks down on a specific floor, the system will notify participants in ways that work for everyone and direct them to a different meeting room, update attendee calendars to keep everyone informed, and deploy a technician to fix the mechanical issues. All thanks to real-time data processing. Your occupants can rest assured knowing the building is hard at work behind the scenes, fixing things they don't even see or feel. With spatial awareness, the system can dispatch the right skill set closest to the issue for rapid resolution. The technology even helps ensure our buildings are kept secure. One of the best things about the technology is the all-encompassing view I have of my entire portfolio. Now I can optimize my resources and make data-driven decisions. This empowers me to plan proactively for the future and run operations seamlessly. Smart, intelligent, sustainable. Optimizing the way we operate our buildings and in the long run, saving us money, helping us maintain fiscal discipline. It's the new business as usual.
Okay, so I hope that gives you a view on, the actual real. Oh. real life uses that we have of our facilities and how it's actually used within our organisation. There's a framework that we built behind this to give the whole project and the whole business a reason that we wanted to do this, because Microsoft doesn't invest in these technologies unless there's a business case like any other organisation. So there's key pillars which were built that really helped us kind of set ourselves up for success in this. So we looked at, the movement of people. What was the employee and visitor experience? How could we really help people get the most from their facilities? What drives productivity? So how are we going to set the meeting rooms up? How are we going to make sure we have the right number of meeting rooms for the business? How do we have focus rooms, and so on and so forth? So actually look at the cross visitor and employee experience to make sure that's right. Then also we looked at actually how the real estate business needs to run their business at a profit as well. So how do we operate it from an FM perspective? How do we give the right space usage? And how do we make sure it's protected as well from a security perspective? And all these underlying the key capabilities which I mentioned earlier about sustainability and accessibility. To do this, we had to build a platform, and this is looking a more complex, slide. And what I wanted the message to take out of this actually is we recognize the fact there is multiple different sources of data, multiple different systems, and multiple different sensors we're getting data from and devices. But actually, what we needed to do is make sure we built the right platform, which we could then start creating the actual insights and the dashboards on top of. So there's an awful lot of work that we had to do in terms of understanding to make sure that the right infrastructure is put in the first place, whether it's the right IoT sensors, making sure that the right device gateways are in there. But then also, what experience did we want to give at the end? What did we want the people at the front end to be able to see? They don't really care about the plumbing underneath the seats, but we have to make sure the platform is easy and accessible and usable as possible. And this comes with some of the data challenges that we know are out there, and some of the interpretability that they have between systems. So how could we seamlessly do this and make this as frictionless as possible? And again, the key message I want you to take from here is just the colors, okay? Not the details of the boxes, but we know that there's a whole bunch of third-party services out there. We know there's custom bits of components out there. We know there's some Microsoft components that we have out there as well. But we, again, had to be able to integrate all these from different multiple sources. And this can be done in a much more simple way, or much more or could be much more complex, depending on where the source of data was coming from. So we recognized the fact when we started building the platforms from digital twins, that how can we simplify this as easy as possible, provide a seamless experience. So how do we replicate this? In a simple way, it's the simplest way we started thinking about it is actually a cross-business partnership, that we had to think about the replication, who would get the benefits from this replication, and who would help input into this replication to make sure we could drive the right result for the organization. So it's everything from our real estate and security to make sure that that team had the right information and be able to input the right information. We then use some of our core engineering and product teams to help build the right model underneath, to be able to produce something which we could then actually take out to market. And finally, from our commercial team, we had to make sure that our smart buildings, smart campuses go to market was right. So in terms of the industry innovation and driving our business forward, everyone had to be on board for the whole project. And what this resulted in is a product we have now called the Azure Digital Twins. So it's our cloud-based digital twins model. So everything that we did within our own smart campuses, we've now said, this is really useful. Actually, let's create this as a commercial offering and help our customers to be able to do exactly the same as what we have. So we've done a lot of the work behind the scenes in terms of the plumbing to make it as easy as possible now. So we work very closely with lots of the OEMs out there. We work very closely with lots of our partners as well to make sure anything they bring out new to market can really be brought into our own modeling and really drive out to customers. And really this is to allow the scale and also to make sure people can benefit across any particular industry, whether it's in a building, whether it's a ship, whether it's a workplace or an aircraft, that actually we can start creating proper digital twins of these. And these models are now becoming more and more more and more prevalent across lots of different industries, as I mentioned there. We work very closely with the public sector and the government in the UK as well about how we can help really drive and show the benefits from modelling to help them save costs, operate buildings more efficiently, operate their organisation more efficiently. But what the key thing that we're always remembering is, what's the reason we're doing this? And actually, it's about developing more productive people or more productive organizations. People won't buy into it, customers won't buy into it unless there's a real tangible end benefit. So it's how do we make sure and how do we show the value back to our end users? How do we show that if someone can find me better in an organization or find me better in a building, what does that really mean? And really just make sure we have the wider benefit across our wider benefit across the businesses, so everyone knows where the value can be taken. But we can't just do this by ourselves at Microsoft. We have a huge number of partners we work with, and this is just a selection of who we worked with across in actually within when we're developing our smart built campus. That was a number of different building energy management systems. There were digital twin people, there were construction people, there were facilities management. So the real message I want to give to you is that, at Microsoft, we created this digital twin of our own campus, which was a fantastic piece of work. We've commercialized it through our digital twin offering to really show how you as end users within people who operate building can take advantage of it. But actually, to do that, we used a lot of our partners out there to really help us get to the end goal, because they could all see the benefits as well. So that concludes my little section on how Microsoft sees digital twins, what we're developing within a particular sector. And Peter, just want to hand back over to you for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you for that, and Gordon as well. So bring Gordon back in. We've had some questions come through. Obviously, both Gordon and Tom had a lot to go through there in terms of an introduction to digital twins, actually a real life case study at Redmond there of how digital twins work. So we've had a couple of questions through, and I'll encourage people to still send questions through because we have got time for this. So thank you for the first question. I'm going to start with Justine, who sent through, I work with SMEs and supporting them in working with large corporations. This is especially valuable in the FM tech sector. What do you believe is the biggest challenge for innovation of SMEs in this area? So I guess who wants to take that up? I guess, Tom, from your perspective, you have many clients, I guess, large and SMEs. Yeah. What do you think are the challenges there? And I know you touched upon some of them in your presentation today.
There are a number of challenges, I believe, in this. Firstly, if I start with the FM companies themselves, firstly, it's some of the FM companies having the true vision and the true business buy-in from the board level down, that this is a sector, this is an area which can generate value for the business, can generate more profits. They're so focused on the margins that they work on, which are very small, that actually for us to really be able to develop the tech, you have to invest a lot. So there's that area. Secondly, is the skills that these FM companies have and the ability to build this stuff. There are a lot of generic technology skills out there, but some of them are more specialist, and those resources tend to be expensive. So how do you work with third parties to generate that? And thirdly, it's actually the people who are buying this, in the fact that, I mean, if I think specifically about dealing with government procurement, they don't really understand the value of why you'd add technology into an FM contract. What does it really mean to them? They're all about driving down price, driving down costs, not actually seeing the end results down the line. So I think there's almost a re-education which needs to happen to people who buy FM services about what it could do wider for the organisation. So there's a number of different factors at play, I think, within this. I know companies are trying to change within the FM sector. Definitely, we can see people's perception changing and what people are investing in changing, but still, the people they're selling to, they're still the same people. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch there at the moment.
No, thanks, Tom. And Gordon, to bring you in, obviously from your client base, do you echo a lot of what Tom said there?
For sure. I mean, I think the challenge is a little, we don't want to end up with the digital tail wagging the digital dog, if you like. So I think at the moment we have, really pragmatic fundamental things like the building safety Act that's coming in, within 6 months from now, we have in the operational phase this requirement to maintain the golden thread, as has come out of recent tragedy and now reactive government policy. So that's clearly going to have this golden thread that runs through a theoretical digital twin. I think the challenge is if you orientate your whole digital environment to react to these requirements, then how holistic is your digital strategy, and do you end up being pulled from pillar to post rather than having the kind of core dictate wrapped around your FM model, and then being able to address these peripheral things as part of that strategy? So I think, like Tom said, it's such a big animal that starting to get a real kind of end-to-end understanding of your FM information needs. I'd even say that extends beyond BIM. Facility management information models, I say, would have BIM inside it, but it's broader than that. So starting to try and get something so vast, and that doesn't need to be digital, but it certainly needs to be understood in your information models. Getting that in place then means you can look at where building safety or real estate optimization or air quality, et cetera, can all fit in. And then you can go on a kind of journey, a sustainable roadmap where you will ultimately draw down different parts that will start to form this digital twin. But I think the challenge is getting that vision right at the beginning, because we all know FM doesn't necessarily have loads of resources sitting around twiddling thumbs. So it's finding the time to get the headspace to have a longer term strategy to then deal with the next digital step. That I think is a challenge, and something this series that we're looking to deliver hopefully will start to demystify a little bit of those 1, 2, 3s.
No, that's great, Gordon. Hold some of those thoughts, because I'm going to come to some questions from the audience that touch upon that. Tom, in your presentation, obviously the key word there was collaboration, and it was obviously an advert for Microsoft and the work you've done there, but obviously the partnerships you've formed to get that success and continued success. But I've had a question in here that mentions a number of different platforms such as AutoCAD, Revit, which I'm sure you're familiar from an engineering perspective. But the heart of the question is, as critical part of digital twinning, which was highlighted in your presentation, Tom, how will Microsoft help develop system and data standards between software vendors? So I think one of your presentation slides showed the power of connection, but I guess how has Microsoft overcome some of those challenges with particular vendors that maybe some of their platforms are less easy to share, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It's a very good question, and it's interesting because we work very closely with lots of partners and different vendors currently. Some partners and vendors are easier to work with than others, I think it's fair to say. But what we have done and really try to show to the third parties is actually we're a very open standards platform. So we try to make it as open as possible so they then can take advantage of some of the capabilities that we have as well. People such as Schneider, for example, I'll just say Schneider because it's just top of my mind, but they've created quite a big partnership with us to make sure that they don't keep a closed ecosystem, because they can see the wider benefits. It is something which we will be challenged, especially some smaller software vendors. But I think we're actually beginning to get over the hump now in terms of some of the difficult part of working with those and having more open data standards.
So, Tom, is the closed ecosystem the norm, or are people more to open access of data? Is that quite a naive question?
It was the norm, but people are now recognizing the benefit that actually, if I have a recognize the pitfalls of having a closed ecosystem. They can only take their solutions so far, and actually they're closed to those particular customers they work within that ecosystem. If they then want to open it out to other people who don't necessarily use their ecosystem but could benefit some of their technology, then they need to work in a slightly different manner.
No, thanks, Tom. Gordon, I'm keen to bring you in on this question, just knowing some of your background and some of the clients you've worked with in the past and continue to do. Questions come in about how many successful digital twins exist in the UK today. Not sure you can necessarily answer that, maybe approximate, but any in healthcare, as a healthcare FM, I would love to see it working. So I know you've had experience and vast experience within the NHS setting. I don't know if there's anything you can add to that question there.
I'll start some of this, but I think Tom can certainly weigh in on this specific one as well, knowing some of the stuff they're working on in this space. But I think in terms of, again, we said at the beginning of this, what is a digital twin? And I would say we have digital mirrors, we have digital shadows, and then we have digital twins. Just to give a brief explanation of that, anything that has a reflection of something that did at some point in time reflect that reality would be a digital mirror. It doesn't mean it's real time, it doesn't mean it's up to date, but it's a little like a CAD drawing. You know, it's at the point in time where it was done, it held the information that was correct at that moment. The digital shadows, where we start to not necessarily get the full picture, but we start to have some part of the picture starting to form, so we get that shadow down of whatever's going on, that gives us very much a two-dimensional perspective. So maybe it's a HVAC system in isolation. It's not maybe monitoring air quality in the space that it's operating, but all the mechanics, all the electrical side, the digital twin model is showing this digital shadow. A true digital twin to me has to bring in whole life data, has to be all moving parts. It has to consider, you know, real time and long term. And in terms of I don't think any of those truly exist at the moment. I know there's a number of projects underway in the UK just now to try and establish, out of the kind of back of, I guess, the Centre for Digital Built Britain, the Gemini papers. That was really how to go about it, but it didn't actualize it. So I'm certainly aware of a number of projects in the UK moving into this space, and there's around, in terms of, there's a UN program for sustainable buildings, and there is actually 3 facilities in the UK that are part of that. I'm aware of certainly Birmingham University has a very mature solution in there with Siemens, I believe, which is starting to bring some of the fullness of that there. So the number I couldn't tell you, but things like, you know, power stations, things like train stations, airports, these all have high degrees of what you would term a digital twin. You know, think of the logistics around air travel. All of that is clearly, you know, the control panels. You would see those centers that have all the inbound and outbound activities, as well as all passengers. All of that is in essence a digital twin. I think as a sector, the best examples, the finance sector. If you think of international banking, that operates in a very, what I would call, digitally federated environment, which produces quite a degree of a digital twin in terms of global finance. But yeah, I would say right here, right now, we're really emerging. We're at the beginning of this journey. And things like, even if you look at a smart building, which has every sensor going, but the building that it's beside in the neighborhood is completely dumb, then how much of an influence does that neighbor building have on your digital stack? And if you're not getting that information, are you then slightly diluted to that single source of truth? So I think maybe it's worth, Tom, just, I know NHS specific, I've done, as you say, some work in that regard. And if you look at the aspirations from the NHS team and standing up a digital twin, could that be one of the best digital twins on the planet, bar none? So I think there's loads of activity there, but Tom, maybe you can get a bit specific on.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I was actually down on Friday last week at a hospital down in Swindon, who've got a new facility on the side related to chemotherapy treatment, but it's a much smaller facility compared to a full hospital. The challenge is, you're going to look at our hospital end to end at the size of the hospitals we have in this country, that's your elephant. How on earth just start something that big and that complex? Whereas this new facility on the side was purpose built for a specific reason, much smaller, modern construction techniques, already got sensors in it. So we're looking at creating a digital twin of that to show the value back to the NHS. Now I'm going to be working alongside the current FM provider of that particular facility, because they can see the fact that how can they take that model going forward, so when they're looking at potentially operating different hospitals, that they will show value in a digital twin. Because the challenge is the NHS won't want to pay for that, or the hospital trust won't want to pay for that. But the FM provider can really see the benefit of having a digital twin model to actually provide the service at a much better rate, whether it's saving money for the NHS or driving their efficiencies. So it's something we're absolutely working at. The challenge we have is our aged building stock of the complexity of hospitals in this country, unsurprisingly.
No, and just to follow up that, the question was about the UK, but I guess from a global presence that you both have from your clients, is there any particular country leading the way on this, or is this unfair to do a ranking in that way?
We're pretty good in the UK.
What was that, Gordon? Sorry.
Well, no, I agree with Tom. The UK is certainly not on the back foot in this regard.
Okay. No.
The Scandinavian areas tend to be pretty strong. There's certain mandates running at governmental level that's really forcing those changes through. Norway's really looking quite impressive at the moment. I think Singapore has also got some really pioneering individual instances. I think the Scandinavians are more, national level, and of course the States has high examples as well.
No, that's great. There's just a few questions come through about other countries that are working in this, so it shows the global context of digital twins. I've got a question here, and I'm aware of time, and I'll try and get a couple more in before we need to go. I guess it's really that digital journey, and it's a question from a gentleman called Jason, who says, I don't know the background of his projects. I'm going to just propose a question as he put it. Who do we talk to, and how does one move this type of project forward? So I'm aware that we're starting the journey here. I know it might be dependent on client, the sector, but any best principles of how you would start your digital twin journey? I know we touched upon some of that today, but any good practice guides or any rules of thumb that, if regardless whether it's sector or client, that you should be starting thinking about, of I guess who you should talk to and how this gets moved forward. So I guess it's really starting back to basics, if I'm not being too rude to Jason. Well, where do you actually start with this?
I think the Institute's a good place.
Yeah. Sorry, Gordon, you go first.
No, it's just IWFM are obviously fully aware that this is becoming a big opportunity for FM. So I think it's something we certainly in the technology special interest group see as a needed part to just support our membership with and start to help breaking that whole journey down into more bite-sized pieces. There is a UK BIM framework and a UK BIM alliance. So it's not digital twin per se, but it's, if you're talking about starting on the journey, that's a pretty good place. If there's anything with public sector, anyone with public sector contracts, then these kind of things are going to be more and more mandated anyway. So that would be another good resource from a UK perspective anyway. I also know at an ISO level, in terms of international standards, that the BIM community there has just created a new working group, or is imminently about to do so, Working Group 9, which is specifically titled Digital Twins. So I think a bit of guidance will also be obviously part of that working group's activities. But of course, the software vendors are maybe a little more progressed in the concept of digital twins than FM is. So they're also a super strong resource. Sorry,
That's
Tom,
great.
I didn't mean to talk across you.
No. And from my perspective, when I'm talking to my customers, I'm working very close with a lot of the FM providers at the moment, and they have some of the larger ones have digital innovation hubs in house, and the way that they take it to market is working closely with one of their sector leads, who's then influencing industry at a higher level. But often it's up to the people you're providing the service to, who's got the appetite to do something. You know, some organizations won't have the appetite at all, but if you can demonstrate the value benefits of digital twins, then some organizations are very, very keen to have the conversation.
No, that's great. And yeah, I'm
Peter,
just keen.
Peter,
Go on,
just
Gordon,
before you
go.
leave that one point,
Yeah.
what I'd be interested in from the attendees as well is, would something like this be of interest for the technology SIG to actually stand something up, more of an event that these kind of questions could get tackled a little more intimately and directly? This is something we've been investigating, but not necessarily for the chat or response just now, but contact your local region, your local SIG kind of reps, and we'd be very interested to support in that.
So you certainly resonated with a couple of the audience members. I can say that because a couple have asked for your contact details of presenters. So just to make the audience aware, these slides will be available afterwards, as well as the recording, as well as the contact details of that Tom and Gordon link in there with the technology SIG. So thank you for that. And I think that, yeah, the comment back is, I think event round this would be great. This is just putting a couple of questions together because I'm aware of time. It might be the last one, and it might be a challenging question. Yes, with the Institute for Workplace and Facilities Management, it may be challenging ourselves, but how pivotal is the facility management professional in the digital twin, which I guess in some ways, going back to basics, collaboration, stakeholders. Tom, to come to you, what's your experience today? I mean, you did put that in your slides about challenges around skills, but what's your experience with FM today, and how pivotal are they on this digital twin journey?
They're becoming more pivotal, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. So if you look 3 years ago, I would say they were an afterthought, whereas now they're becoming much more central. And part of the reason why is within Microsoft, we look at the whole built environment sector, everywhere from the people who design and engineering, architectural firms, all the way through to the people building buildings, building infrastructure, then all the way down to the people who operate it. And we see this as a full life cycle of a building or a project. So we always talk in terms of, if you're building a digital twin now, you can't just think about the people who are building the building. You've got to think about the people who are operating it to actually drive the value and the longevity of the building, to drive the sustainable messaging, to drive the value back to the tenant, essentially. So we think about now as FM becoming much more central in the design part early on, as opposed to previously where it was almost an afterthought, because who cares about managing the building? You know, we just want to build the building. We don't really care about managing. We now think that actually that becomes further forward. And we've seen a lot of joint venture collaboration kind of conversations happening with engineering and architectural firms and FM companies now as well, to understand what each other party wants as well. Whereas previously, I didn't think necessarily the architectural people really understood the value about what the overall end-to-end operation is. And a part of this is driven through the governments as well, if I'm honest with you. Some of the government messaging around long-term sustainable goals within the UK, and where we want to be as a UK carbon neutral by 2050. And actually, you have to think about the end-to-end operation. It can't just be siloed, which is what the traditional approach was.
No, thanks, Tom. And it's good to hear that you're starting to see that sea change in terms of FM's importance in that cycle. Gordon, just to give you the final word on this question, apologies to the audience, it will be the last question before we go to a few closing slides. Gordon, your experience this, as well as wearing your technology SIG hat as well.
I mean, personally, I think it's the most important. If you look at the value of a digital twin, it's mostly around enhancing outcomes. And Tom just mentioned net zero. Most of the carbon's created in the operational phase. You look at performance, the buildings are generally there for us to utilize for various purposes. You look at, that whole environmental impact, social value, circular economies. I mean, to me, FM's the potential custodian of a digital reimagining of the built environment. And I agree, we're often last to the table, but I think the value we have to add to this digital promise is I struggle to think of greater.
No, thank you. And at this point, I want to say thank to the audience that have sent questions through. But at this point, I want to say a massive thank you to Tom Brooks from Microsoft and Gordon Mitchell in terms of our presenters today, in terms of this first part of our own journey. And as I say, there's 2 more parts in this series about digital twins. And there was a lot of information today to go through, but those slides will be available as well as this recording shortly. So thank you again, Tom and Gordon, for your great contributions today. So I've just got a couple of closing slides to finish off. For members, that's your CPD number on the screens there. I know many of you are keen to keep your CPD records up to date, so the number's there for you to take down and put on your CPD records. We alluded to the work that we've done with Microsoft in the past around this, and this is our own journey on our tech journey of providing information and guidance back to our members. You can find those reports that were referred to earlier at the start of this webinar on the Insight page. Also, it contains research reports, good practice guides and guidance notes, so please access that. That's where the 2 collateral we've done with Microsoft are housed. Now, as promised, this is a digital twin series. Again, this Q&A could have been a webinar in its own right. We're aware that we want to conclude in a 3-part series. So our next part in our digital twin series is going to be 12 to 1, and more details will be out about that shortly, continuing the debate that we've kicked off today. And part 3, you can see there's on the 30th of November. So put those dates in your diary, folks. More information will be out. We'll have representation from Microsoft and our technology SIG on those episodes. And any questions today that you may have, please join those episodes to continue the debate around our digital twin series. So they're the next parts in the series. Yeah, coming up fast, our awards, IWFM Impact Awards, 17th of October, just to make you aware that's available, and in terms of promoting it and celebrate the profession, which there's a couple of technology awards being handed out there as well. So just to make people aware of that event that's happening. So once again, thank you to Tom and Gordon to go through an hour episode. It could have been a lot longer, but I'm aware of your time. As I say, we've started this series with Microsoft and we've been building guidance to support this with the technology SIG and Microsoft around the area of digital twins. So there will be tangible outputs as well as the webinars. So thank you again, Tom, Gordon. A massive thank you to the audience. I'm aware you've taken an hour of your time out today. As promised, the recording will be available shortly afterwards, so if you want to play it back or pass on to colleagues that couldn't make today's live episode, please do. We will continue the IWFM webinar series. We had our summer break, so our next episode is currently advertised, so please register for that. It's linking a little bit with this because it's talking about data and the issues with data, which was a key theme of the golden thread of anything digital twins or BIM that was referenced today. But once again, a massive thank you for you joining us today, and look forward to hosting many more episodes and hopefully see some of you on those episodes in the future. So thank you again. Take care.